Aloha party people, you are listening to Inside the Desert Oasis Room, episode number 177. This episode is sponsored by the Tiki Bar T-Shirt Club, where their monthly t-shirt designs pay tribute to a Polynesian bar or restaurant from days long past. Each design is available for a limited time and will never be produced again. For more information and to check out this month's shirt, visit tikibartshirtclub.com. This podcast is brought to you in part by the Tiki Tea, a family-owned and operated tropical drink bar in Los Angeles, California. Come get their house specialty, the Raised Mistake, for only $6 on Wednesdays until 9 p.m. For more information, check out their website, tiki-ti.com. This episode is sponsored by Skull and Crown Trading Company, located in the historic Chinatown district of Honolulu on the island of Oahu. Skull and Crown is Hawaii's premier exotic destination. Enjoy delicious island favorites and classically crafted cocktails in their mysterious tiki room or their enchanted courtyard. For more information, visit them on the web at skullandcrowntrading.com or follow them on Facebook or Instagram at Skull and Crown Trading Co. Today we chat with Fritz Costa, author, professor, and scientist. Learn about Fritz's scientific background, his former life in academia, and hear how he went from being a college professor to becoming a blogger and author, telling the stories of Shag, Tim Biskup, Derek Yaniger, Miles Thompson, and Brandi Milne in his new book, The Lives of Lowbrow Artists. As always, I hope you enjoy this episode as much as we did bringing it to you. If you enjoy this podcast, please consider helping us with your support during this challenging time. Stop by desertoasisroom.com to check out our merch or leave us a tip. We've got tiki mugs, t-shirts, and pendants available right now. Any purchase or donation, no matter the size, is totally appreciated and helps keep this podcast coming to you every week. Alrighty. Join us inside the Desert Oasis Room and give it up for the Professor, Fritz Costa.
Inside the Desert Oasis Room.
Hi, Adrian.
Is this the Professor?
Well, yes, it is. It's office hours right now, and I hope you're drunk because I am.
Oh, nice. So how you doing, Fritz?
I'm doing pretty well, sir. How about you?
I'm good, thanks. Just trying to get through this pandemic like everybody else.
Oh, I know, man.
Yeah.
I think it's making us all a little psychotic, and it's manifesting itself in different ways.
Yeah.
in different people.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that it's bringing out the best and the worst in people.
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
It's interesting to see how some people are reacting to all kinds of things, from having to wear a mask to how they're treating their lives, with the way that they're either they've either become very much a germaphobe or they are ignoring it completely.
Yes, exactly. And I think we all kind of need to be in the middle, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, hey, man, I'm glad you joined the podcast. Thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm a big fan of your show, man.
Thanks, and thanks for sending me a copy of your new book.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, I'm still working on it, to be quite honest with you. So I have an older Kindle, and the battery doesn't hold a charge as much as it used to. And so I'm finding myself having to recharge it more often than I used to. So
Got it.
Yeah.
No worries. I have an older Kindle too, and it's in black and white.
Yeah, mine's not that old, but but it was a few years ago. I think I was I think it was Amazon Day or something, and they were on sale for like $30.
No way.
Yeah, they were real cheap. So I bought one. I mean,
nice.
you can't beat it. And it has apps for all kinds of other stuff, like YouTube and a lot of other things that I use. So it was a good deal.
$30 is, yeah. I mean, I back then I spent $100. I thought that was already a great deal, but $30, that's, and you can go online with yours. Mine is just literally a Kindle.
Yeah, I had one of those when they first came out, the black and white one, and it's okay. But it's limited with what you can do with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm happy with the newer one I have. I don't use it as often as I should, but I have an iPad that's newer, faster, and has more apps and stuff. I'm
kind of like in between. Like, I'm not a technophobe. Like, I embrace new technology, but at the same time, there's something satisfying about reading like a physical book too.
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm in between. So sometimes I'm on my Kindle. Sometimes I want to pick up something.
Sure. Yeah, me too. So I want to talk about your background because I've been following you for quite a while. Mm-hmm. For listeners that don't know, Fritz is Lowbrow Literati.
That's right.
And I've been following you for years. I've always enjoyed your posts and your blogs, and it's crazy because everything's written very well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
It comes from a journalistic perspective of somebody who understands the subgenres that we enjoy, which is not necessarily something that go hand in hand, right? So, what I find interesting is your background and how you got there. So, can we tell people your story about that, where you came from unconventionally?
Absolutely. So, I am actually from the science world. I went to college and I went to grad school specifically for science. That is my passion. So I majored in biochemistry for grad school, and the dream was to become a college professor. That's all I wanted to do. I didn't want to make lots of money, work for a big company. That wasn't the dream. It was just to be a college professor and teach and connect with people. Right?
Where did that come from?
Oh, man. I think love of Star Wars. Like, when I saw Star Wars, that was it. I was just into science fiction, and I got more interested in science, I guess. Mm-hmm. And that's where that came from, I'll be honest, though. I'm not like, because people read my background and they see my list of publications, they think I'm a smart guy. And I get by, but I'm not the world's best student, to be honest. Yeah. I'm a C student, in college, and I improved as, time went on, but I'm just the average Joe.
Sure. What made you want to be a professor, though?
You know what? It's just, like I said, watching a lot of Star Wars, watching a lot of Discovery Channel and Jacques Cousteau, and those guys came from like a very academic background. And this is when Discovery Channel was still brand spanking new.
Sure.
And they were like the first channel that just only showed documentaries 24 hours a day. Right. Mm-hmm. And I just loved it. And those are the people I kind of admired. Right. So, I really dug into that, and they were all college professors. They were, and so that's, I guess, where the dream kind of came from.
Right. Yeah. A lot of what those guys do for those channels is stuff that they would do anyway as professors, and it's part of their ongoing research of what they're studying in their field.
Exactly. And they're not doing it for the money.
Right.
Like, Jacques Cousteau wasn't doing that so he could be a rich guy. He invented scuba and all that stuff because that was his passion, right? So I guess I'm driven by passion, and I'm a very passionate guy. So I wanted to leave my mark on science, and I want to make my own discovery. I want to contribute something to the science world. So that was my driving force, right? I'm like, that's why I want to become a college professor.
Yeah. What specifically was it that you were drawn to with the science stuff? Was it like discovering new types of medicines? Well, is that more like medical field? That's science, though, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, the draw to me was like, when you're Jacques Cousteau or you're, Einstein or you're Marie Curie or something, and you're working on something that no one else has ever seen, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, or let's say you're a microbiologist and you discover a new species of bacteria or whatever, and you're like, man, I'm one of the first people to see this thing or work on this thing. Like, how cool is that, right? To me, that's the payoff. It's not the money. It's the discovery is the fun.
It's funny, when I was in college and I followed because I'm just like you, I was a C student in high school, and I went to junior college first, and I went on to earn my bachelor's degree and other things down the road. But when I was in junior college, I still had that C student mentality where it's just kind of like, I don't really want to be here, but I have to. And I remember looking at my art professor and thinking, what a cush job, man. I'd like to do this. He was sitting in an art studio with different kinds of classes, right? He would do, he'd have a drawing class, which I took. He had a painting class, which I took. And, of course, there were other disciplines in the art department, sculpture and that kind of stuff. And it just looked kind of like such a low stress, easygoing kind of thing. And I thought, man, I'd love to do this. I wouldn't mind being like an art professor, or and then there were other studies in the campus that seemed equally stress free. And obviously I didn't go down that path, but it's interesting how people, the different things that people maybe are motivated by. Science is something that is really interesting to me too. I mean, I'm not somebody that's really like nerded out by it, but what really kind of drew me down that path, and I don't know how much of this is science, but I'm a big fan of the Breaking Bad series.
Oh, me too.
Right? And
I could watch Mr. White
and
Jesse just like a montage of them just making meth and just selling it on the street. Like, no story. That's it. I'm in.
Right. And I watch Walter White with what he knows about chemistry. Yeah. And I think, man, I wonder if that would be an interesting field. I mean, they had him as a chemistry teacher, but people don't think about like the things that we use in everyday life, from car wax to even like ketchup, right? Because that's food chemistry.
A scientist had to come up with that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So like, who's the guy who came up with, OxyClean, right?
Yeah.
And he's a millionaire, but that's all science.
It is all science. I'm so glad you brought up Breaking Bad. Do you remember, it was an episode where Walter White was working with this other science guy, and it wasn't Jesse. It's when he was beginning to become big time. I forgot his name.
It was Gail Bedecker.
That's it, Gail.
Yeah.
Right? And then Gail said something to Walter White, and he's like, this working in the lab, working in science is the closest thing to magic as we can get.
Right.
And I'm like, that's it. That's exactly it. That's why I got into science. It's magic.
Yeah. Wow. What a poignant thing to say. So, as a scientist, how did you end up with Lowbrow Literati? How did that get started?
Okay. So, the goal was to become a college professor, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you go through grad school and you got to publish papers. You got to make, small discoveries here and there, and which I did, right?
Okay.
And then I became a college professor. Nowhere too fancy, not like Harvard or anything like that. I just, worked at a community college.
Okay.
And I taught anatomy and physiology, and I also taught molecular bio.
Okay.
And I just loved it, man. So I just, to me, I thought of my class as like edutainment.
Yeah.
Right? It's education. I'm here to learn something in my class, and I'm going to entertain you. It's like live Discovery Channel.
It was the professor.
Yeah. And exactly. I was like, when I step into class, I had a character that I put on,
Mm-hmm.
right? And, there were jokes. I would put in jokes in there and time everything. And I just absolutely loved it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, as you can see and hear, probably, I'm a very bombastic kind of guy. I'm loud. I drink a lot. I mean, I don't get drunk in public, but I'm not an introvert.
So,
right?
Real quick, I'm going to interrupt you about the whole I drink a lot thing. Do you remember where we first met?
I do remember. It was at Tiki Tea.
It was.
I was with my friend Kevin Dia and his wife.
That's right.
And then you were guarding the door, and Kevin Dia said hello to you, and Linda said hello to you, and then Kevin introduced me to you, and I'm like, and he said, "Oh, this is Adrian. He's Polynesian Pop in Tiki Central. This is Fritz, and he's the monitors in Tiki Central." I'm like, "Oh, hey, you're Polynesian Pop."
That's right, the monitors.
Yes.
Yeah, that's funny. I had forgotten about that. What was Kevin's name?
He was Paranoid 123.
That's right, Paranoid 123.
Yeah, because he works in IT.
Yeah,
and he's like super paranoid about everything. He doesn't have a Facebook account, doesn't have an Instagram account. He's internet security, so he's super paranoid.
Well, was he living in New York already at the time?
He was living in New York already.
Because he used to be an LA guy.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, exactly. So just wanted to interrupt you real quick to see.
No problem. That was a fun memory too.
Yes, go ahead and continue.
So anyway, as you can tell, I'm like this bombastic guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is not your typical scientist. I mean, in grad school, we would have these biochemistry retreats once a year, which the department pays for us to go on a retreat for like a weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And, all the weirdos just found each other, it's like, hey, you meet me at my room, at this time, and we're having a party, and it's just lots of drinking, lots of whatever, right? And that's not your typical science guy. They're very introverted, they're very quiet, they're very bookish.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm not that smart. I have enough to get by.
But it's funny that you call them introverted when you say that the typical scientist is a person that's like what, quiet,
yes,
introverted, stoic. Because that's not the way that the media likes to portray them. Like, for example, Doc Brown or Bill Nye.
Larger than life.
Yeah, Bill Nye, the science guy.
Larger than life.
And who's the guy with all the question marks on his blazer? What's his name?
Beekman's World.
So they make them look like these really eccentric
characters.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's not the case.
That's not the case. That's not the case.
So how do you feel when you see that? Do you think like, oh, this is just Hollywood fluff? Like this is not really.
It is Hollywood fluff. Case in point, my boss in grad school discovered, some protein in snake venom that could potentially cure cancer. Right.
Wow.
So Discovery Channel got a hold of this, and they wanted to film my boss.
Okay.
Well, they needed lab people to be kind of doing experiments, quote unquote, right?
Right.
So I was the grad student, and they're like, Fritz, okay, we want to film you here doing this and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay. And they're like, okay, that's kind of boring. Can you zazz it up? Can you put like a little red food coloring in that beaker? And can you put blue?
Wow.
So there was a little bit of Hollywood in there. And yeah, absolutely. They fluff it up. They, make these characters eccentric, right? When the truth is, they're very, very timid. I was the square peg in the round hole. Okay.
So back to what you were saying, you would go to these parties.
Yeah. And you can find all the weirdos find each other,
Sure.
and we did. And so now here I am. I'm teaching now, right? I'm not in grad school anymore. And in my class, there's like, music. There's, I insert a lot of jokes. I make fun of myself. I pretend to be absent-minded sometimes. I pretend to be, like my character, right?
Right.
And the kids love it, and so, but I noticed that I was the square peg in the round hole in the department. Yeah. Right. And so now here you go. So you start when you're a professor, you start out as something called adjunct professor.
Right.
So you're part-time. Okay. So I max out at 9 hours a week per college.
Wow.
All right. Yeah. So I have to work 3 different colleges just to work full time.
Oh.
Okay.
That explains why I have a buddy who's a professor also, and he works at 4 different colleges.
There you go.
That explains why. Okay.
That explains why, because he taps out at 9.
Okay.
So, when I, you as an adjunct, you get the leftover classes. Okay. So the tenured professors, they get first pick. They're like, well, I want to teach the Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 11 a.m. Right? Yeah. Well, okay, Fritz, we have the Saturday at 7 in the morning. Do you want to teach that? I guess so.
Wow, I didn't know that's how they did that.
PM. You want to teach? I guess so.
Wow. Okay.
Right? So that's how you start out as an adjunct. And I knew that. I knew that I had to prove myself. Sure. I knew that I had to work up the ladder, and I was willing to accept that. Right. So now, here we go. A tenured professor retires. So now there's an opening. Right. Right. I apply. And they gave it to this other guy, and I don't want to get into the politics, and I don't want to get into sour grapes, but basically I didn't get the job. Yeah. Okay. And the message was clear that, yeah, you're not going to become tenured, wow. Like that was by that time, it was my 4th time applying. Wow. Okay. And I'm now teaching. I've been teaching now for 6 years. Yeah. And I'm looking around me, and I'm looking at the other guys who've been teaching there for 13 years, and they're still adjunct. Wow. They're still not tenured. Wow. And I'm like, well, I don't want to be those guys. Yeah. So I said, well, screw you guys. I'm gonna go to industry. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. I'll go work for Genentech. I'll go work for Amgen, some big biotech company. Yeah. Right? I have like papers published under my belt. I have a book chapter published on cancer research. Like I can do what you guys do. Mm-hmm. Right? So then I start applying. And this is how naive I was, right? And I started applying, and I'm like, how come they're not calling me back? Like, I don't get it, right? Like, didn't they see my resume? Like, all those papers I published? And then finally, a friend's dad who works in the industry reviewed my resume. He goes, listen, he goes, your resume is impressive. I'm sure you're a smart guy. But what's lacking is you don't have industry experience. So you look like a big risk to them. Oh, crap. Is that what it is?
I thought maybe there was some kind of blackball happening with you because of the university.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, it's just because I don't have... So academia and industry are like oil and water. They don't like to mix very well. Right.
There's that old saying that those who don't know teach.
Yeah.
Yeah. I went to tech school in my later years, and the people that were teaching at the tech school were people that, for one reason or another, left the industry. Maybe like they were, they were no longer relevant in what they did, or some kind of politics that they also had to endure or experience. And they ended up in the classroom. And I remember one of them there was a whole lecture on politics in the real world with his, with that particular field. And I found that kind of interesting. So
yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Politics is everywhere. It doesn't matter what field you're in, right? Yeah. But it's tough when you've dedicated your entire life to this thing you want to do, and you spent 6 years doing this thing, and then you realize you're not going to get the job, and you'll never get the job. Right. And then I kind of went into a deep depression. It's like, shit. Yeah, I spent 15 years of my life studying for this thing. I spent another 6 years of my life working to this goal, which I'm never going to get now, right? So we're at 21 years. I just wasted my life. Wow. That's what I did, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I kind of went into a deep depression. I didn't know it at the time, but in retrospect, that's what it was.
You recognize it now.
I recognize it now. Yeah, it was horrible to my family. I wasn't a sad person. I'm not a sad depressed. I'm an angry depressed.
Okay.
I take it out on my family.
Okay.
And by the way, God bless my wife for sticking around with me. I just want to say that, Deb, I love you.
Yeah. I wonder why my wife sticks around with me too.
Oh yeah, I know. We're just lucky, man. Just count your blessings.
Yeah.
So anyway, my friend's dad, who's reviewing my resume, goes, "What you need is experience." So I'm like, okay, fine. So I got an unpaid internship at this clinic to get clinical trials experience.
Wow.
Okay. And it was only because my aunt knew the boss.
This is like starting over.
It's starting over, man.
This is like a kid graduating does an unpaid internship.
No, it's a 40-year-old doing an unpaid internship.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying is that this is typically it's a new grad going into an unpaid internship, and you're doing this after having been a professor for more than half a decade. Exactly.
I have a 2-year. I had to swallow my pride. I had a 2-year-old. I had a mortgage to pay.
Yeah.
I sucked in my pride and did the internship, and my boss was a 23-year-old dude.
Wow.
Straight out of college.
Wow.
He just graduated from Columbia. Oh, no, sorry, not Cornell.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And, in his head, his shit didn't stink because he came from the Ivy Leagues.
Right.
And I didn't. Right. And he would yell at me like, "Hey, Fritz, where's my files?" It's like, "Oh, shit, sorry, here it is. And I'm thinking to myself, dude, kids like you would be crying in my office, begging me not to fail them.
Right.
And here I am. I now have to answer to you and take your shit.
Right. Wow.
Right. And so you can see why I was depressed and why I was taking it out on my family. So again, I was a horrible person. And then one day my wife goes, hey, so it's been a year now. I've been looking, no job. And I'm doing the internship, the unpaid internship. My wife goes to me, hey, this is your job. Stop looking for a job.
Wow.
Okay. Just do something fun. Give yourself a break. Stop looking for a job.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, all right, well, that takes pressure off. Okay.
Yeah.
What do I want to do? Right. And I will get back to Kevin Dia and That Night I Met You.
Okay.
Okay. So my wife and I got married in 2002, and she was in charge of the honeymoon. And she's like, hey, we're going to go to Tahiti. Sure. Let's go to Tahiti. I just know it's far away.
Yeah. And beautiful.
And beautiful. That's all I heard. So we go there. Yes, it was beautiful, but I literally just fell in love with the Polynesian culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I love their folk music. I love their dance. I love their food. I just fell in love. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I come back from Tahiti with this, passion for anything Polynesian. And then Kevin goes up to me, he goes, hey, if you like Polynesian stuff, he goes, there's this bastardized version called Polynesian pop.
Mm-hmm.
You might want to look into it. And there's this website called Tiki Central. And check it out. You might like it.
So
that was it.
You knew Kevin before Tiki Central.
Yes, I knew Kevin before Tiki Central.
Okay.
He was almost like a college friend.
Okay.
We didn't go to the same college, but we knew the same circle of friends.
Right. Yeah, I have friends like that too.
Yeah. And that was it. Shag was my gateway drug.
Right.
Tiki mugs. And then I discovered Exotica.
Right.
And I'm like, what is this? And then I started learning about the heyday of Tiki.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why wouldn't you want to live in this forever?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And then so here I am. My wife is telling me, just do something fun. And I'm like, well, I like this Polynesian stuff and, this lowbrow art thing. I go, why don't I start a blog and, just interview artists, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I subscribe to Juxtapose. I subscribe to High Fructose, and I love those magazines, but I always felt like they weren't asking enough of the artist.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I want to dig deeper. So then I started, just kind of calling around.
Okay.
And eventually Tim Biskup returned my phone call.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a nice start.
Yes, that is a nice start. And then, I Tim Biskup, kind of talked to me and I started writing a long blog, 7-part blog about his life, his influences and his art, and started the Lowbrow Literati website. And no one really visited it, but I didn't care. I was having a great time.
Yeah. So let me ask you a couple questions. So first, what was the driving force for the writing? Where did that come from? Were you someone that enjoyed writing before
No.
outside of the science stuff?
No. Yeah. So like I said, I'm like a C student. I didn't read much in high school or college, for fun, that is. I mean, I read the textbook if you told me I had to read it for the exam. I was not a very good writer, but I did take this one journalism class in college.
Okay.
And I just remember having a lot of fun during that class, right?
Right.
And again, going back to the science, and you asked me what attracted me to science, I was attracted to journalism, because here are reporters, journalists, or photographers, photojournalists in the front line, and they're really documenting history.
Yeah.
Right. If you think of like the RFK assassination, it's this very vivid image of RFK being shot in the head, and then there's this Asian butler like looking up in the screen and crying for help. If you think of the Vietnam War, and there's like this tank, and there's this Buddhist who set himself on fire, right? Like those are very powerful images, and they were captured by photojournalists and journalists, right? And they were there, right?
The writing thing fascinates me because as somebody who did not come from a writing background, when your wife said, do something fun, I interpreted that in two ways now. Was the fun, and I put that in air quotes, was the fun the writing part, or was it the tiki part?
It was both. The fun part to me was talking to the artists. I looked up to these people, and I'm like, wow, I'm actually getting to talk to Tim Biskup now, and he's telling me his life story. And then when I record that and I go home and I transcribe the audio, to me that's fun too. It's very meditative, just writing everything they said on paper. And then now I have to write this thing, and I'm reading my notes and what they said, and I'm like, okay, well, when he told me the story, he was kind of going everywhere, but I need to make it into a cohesive story, so that's kind of challenging. So how do I do that? And so that was kind of fun too. Right. But like I said, I'm not a good writer. I'm just an average student. So I did get help from my cousin, who did major in journalism.
Okay.
And so I said, hey, can you edit my stuff? Because I sound like I'm rambling. And I was. And so she's like, okay, well, I'll help you edit your stuff. And throughout the years, I slowly learned the rules from her. And I'm like, all right, well, don't even talk about that because you're rambling, and she's just going to edit that out.
Right,
so don't even ramble.
Right.
Don't use those sayings because she's going to edit that out. So, talk in a different way. So I learned how to become a writer, but I'm not really a good writer. I mean, I'm okay. I sound smarter because of my editor.
Wow. Well, so this is crazy to me because a couple thoughts come to mind. The first, I've always held lowbrow literati in high regard. The writing has always been very good. It's always been very good, and it's been something that I always looked up to. That it actually was very journalistic in style.
Yes, because a journalist edited my stuff.
Okay, so that's my first thought. I find that super interesting, considering that you don't come from a background of writing. And another thought that comes to mind is your new book. And let's talk about your new book, Lives of Lowbrow Artists. This book, considering how long you've had Lowbrow Literati, I feel like this book, it's so strange that it's only coming out now, that this seems like something that you could have written with some of these other articles that you wrote on your blog many years ago.
Yeah. So all of this stuff that's in the book was in my blog. And it took me years to realize that I was writing a book. Yeah. So I have a friend who does run a very successful website, and he critiqued my blog when it was in the early stages, and he says, Fritz, what you want is an article that's 500 words max. Okay, people shut off at 500 words. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but like, that's not what I want to do. I want to kind of revive long form journalism. Right. And then that's when I realized, like, he's right. No one's visiting my blog. My posts are way too long. I need to post more frequently, which I can't because it takes time to interview and transcribe these interviews. What I'm doing is writing a book.
Yeah.
So when I realized that, I took everything off the web, and I'm like, I'm going to rewrite this in a book chapter format rather than a blog format. And that's why it took some time.
Okay. So in this book, this is volume 1. We have the story of Shag, the story of Derek Yaniger,
Tim Biskup, Miles Thompson,
that's right.
And Brandi Milne.
Right. Interesting stuff. And what's especially interesting for someone like me, I know a couple of those guys, and I know a couple of them very well, and I'm still learning new things about them. Right?
I'm glad.
And you know, when you learn something new about someone you think you know well, that it's one of those moments where you're like, oh wow. And just referencing back to this whole pandemic thing, I think that I know my friends pretty well, but then some of the things that people have said or posted or done during this quarantine makes me scratch my head and think, wow, I thought I knew them. Right. So talk about the process of putting this book together.
So when I finally realized I was writing a book, right? Like I said, I took everything off the web and just kind of, wrote in my own and just kept it on the side, right? And again, by this time, just to kind of set the stage here, I am now no longer an unpaid intern. I eventually did find a job in industry. Okay.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And so here I am. I'm working in the industry, entry level, by the way, right?
Of course, yeah, because you're starting over.
Yeah, because you have to start over. And, my first year there, I'm like, man, this is like secretarial work. Like, why am I doing this?
Right.
I had the most important job in the world. I was teaching, and I was basically doing it for peanuts, right? All I wanted to do was just pay my mortgage.
Right.
Okay, now I have this other job. It's paying more, but I feel like it's just busy work. It's tedious work, right?
Right.
Of course, I was still new, and I didn't realize why we were doing these things. It's because it's law. It's FDA law. Like, you have to record all these things, right? So here I am. I'm working my first year, and I decided I'm writing a book. Well, I have a 2-year-old at home. The minute I go home, I have another job, which is being a dad.
Of course.
Right. How am I going to write this book? So I wrote the book during my lunch hour.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I'm on break from noon to 1. If I write 500 words during that hour, then hooray.
Wow.
If I write 2 words, then hey, at least I tried. Right.
Well, even if it's 2 words, it's still forward progress. It's 2 more words than there were before. Yeah.
Yeah. And think about it. That's like 5 hours a week, 20 hours a month.
Right.
So, I'm like, okay, well, it's keeping my mind occupied. I'm enjoying this thing that I'm doing. Sure. Right. So I'm writing the book, and then it's slowly snowballing, right? The minute Tim Biskup said yes, that gave me some street cred.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
I can now reach out to Miles Thompson and go, hey, your buddy. I interviewed your buddy Tim Biskup. Can I interview you? Well, sure.
Yeah.
All right. And then now I have 2 under my belt.
Right.
Okay. Hey, Derek Yaniger. I just interviewed Tim Biskup and Miles Thompson. Do you want to be part of my book and stuff? Okay. So now I'm slowly building up momentum, right?
Right.
And, eventually I get the Shag, right? And so here I am, now I have 5 artists, 5 lives, 5 chapters. And my editor, my cousin, Josephine, is editing my stuff, and she's going, Fritz, it's kind of interesting. When she was in college, she did a semester abroad.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, which I wish I did. I never did. And she spent the semester in Italy. And one of the classes she took was like art appreciation. And it was Renaissance art. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes, what you're doing is you're Giorgio Vasari. Because that was the textbook I used when I was in college.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, who's Giorgio Vasari?
Right.
and I'm thinking, well, he must be some PhD from Harvard or some PhD from UCLA. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I Google Giorgio Vasari, and turns out Giorgio Vasari was alive during the Renaissance. And everything we know about Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Raphael was because of Giorgio Vasari's book.
Oh, okay.
So I'm like, and then so I got curious. I'm like, all right, I got to buy this book. So I buy his book, and I'm like, holy crap. He's just telling their life story from when they were a kid to when they got older.
Right.
And he's just documenting their influences, what their parents did for a living, how they got into this art gig thing.
Right.
And I'm like, that's exactly what I'm doing.
Right.
So I'm like, I want to be the Giorgio Vasari of this movement. There is no Giorgio Vasari of this movement. Right. So then, I eventually compiled enough chapters to substantiate a book. And now I'm like, well, how the heck do you publish something? Right. So, I started researching, and I'm like, oh, well, do you know Shag's book? It's not Shag's book, but his cover's on it. It's like Tiki Road Trip or something.
Tiki Road Trip, yeah.
Where the guy documents all these tiki bars and restaurants all over the country. Right. And Shag did the artwork for it.
Yes.
Right? And so I'm like, well, you know what? Like, that's kind of lowbrow-ish, I go, why don't I approach that publisher and pitch my book? So I went to their website, followed their instructions. You got to send us, the first 3 chapters. You got to send us a proposal. And it took like 8 hours to compile this stuff.
Wow.
I had to put my resume and who's your market for this. And so I did that. And not just for them, but for other publishers as well. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And just no one quite got my vision.
See, that's interesting. That's interesting that you would say that, because like you said, this hasn't really been done before. You'd think that there would be a publisher that was already looking for a project like this. And especially that one, right? Tiki Road Trip.
Yeah. I mean, who knows? Maybe they didn't sell enough of Tiki Road Trip and they're like, yeah, we don't want to go that road anymore. It doesn't sell that many copies. But the argument I was trying to make is like, look, Robert Williams, the person who coined the word lowbrow. Right.
And I didn't know that until I read that in your book.
Oh, well, there you go. Thank you. And by the way, just as a side note, I didn't know, I realized I was a fan of Robert Williams' work when I was in high school.
Sure.
So in high school, I was in 10th grade, and all these kids around me kept on talking about this awesome new album called Appetite for Destruction by this new band called Guns N' Roses.
Right.
And then I'm watching the news at home, and there's like angry parents, and Geffen Records is in trouble because the Guns N' Roses album cover is so controversial and hideous. And I don't know if you remember, but the Appetite for Destruction album was named after Robert Williams's painting called Appetite for Destruction.
Again, I only knew this because of your book.
Oh,
yeah.
Well,
I didn't know this until I read your book. So yeah. So we can finish the story, but before you do, I want to stress to our listeners that this is the kind of stuff that's in the book. So if you want to hear more interesting stuff or read more interesting stuff, they need to pick up the book. But yeah, this is so go ahead. Yeah, I found this fascinating as well.
Yeah. So here's Robert Williams, right? He paints like this robotic monster.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know what it is. And then there's a girl on the street, and her panties are by her ankle, and then there's like this other robot jumping from a fence, and you're like, what the fuck is going on? But I can't stop looking, but what is this? Right. And so he he's a comic book artist, and he's like, oh, it's lowbrow art because comics are lowbrow, right? Opposite of highbrow.
Right.
And so here you go. Robert Williams coined this term in 1980s, right? And started Juxtapose. And, Juxtapose is now outselling Art Forum, which is like a journal for the art world. And I'm like, how is it that like Juxtapose is outselling Art Forum? It is basically mainstream now, but no one wants to talk about it. No one wants to document this art movement that's inspired by cartoons. Right. And again, none of the publishers saw my vision.
Yeah.
Right.
So did you end up self-publishing?
I did end up self-publishing. And you know what? At first I was kind of like a little bummed. Because there's a stigma with self-publishing. It's called vanity press.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, no publisher wanted to touch his stuff, so he self-published just for his own ego.
Gotcha. Well, I think that's changing now, though.
Yeah.
Because we are in an era now where you don't need an outside party to get your content out there,
Yeah, and to validate your work.
I mean, there was a time when you needed to have a recording studio record an album for you.
To become a musician.
Like a paid professional musician. But now people are self-publishing their music, and it's not any less valid,
No.
Yeah.
Artists needed a gallery to validate that they were a real artist.
Right.
Now there's Instagram, and
sure.
Why can't I buy art directly from the artist's website?
And you can do an art show anywhere now, and it's acceptable to do. For example, a friend of mine whose wife is an artist, last summer, I believe, it might not even been that long ago, she did an art show at a barbershop in Echo Park.
How cool is that?
Right. And it wasn't a gallery, but, she was out here on vacation, and, they live in Germany, and they were out here on vacation. And while she was here, she thought, I want to have an art show. And I want to display my work. And she didn't need the quote unquote legitimacy or validity, of a gallery to do this. She had it done at a barbershop, and it's an old school barbershop that she put all her art around, and they served refreshments, and they had a nice turnout,
Yeah. I mean, if you sell your art, you're a professional.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. Right. So the artists that you have in this particular volume, have you gotten any feedback from them yet?
Yeah. So a lot of them have seen their chapter before it came out.
Right.
Again, it was a blog.
Right.
But I mean, I remember the first time I put Tim Biskup's blog up, it was nice of him. He didn't have to do this, but he sent me an email and he's like, "Hey, Fritz, I just really want to say thanks for the amount of work you put into this."
Yeah.
Right. And then,
I'm sure he was flattered. I mean, it's probably the first real in-depth article that was written about him, which means that you were very interested in his story. So that I'm sure he was flattered. I mean, I certainly would be.
And him as a person.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, when I met Shag, he was nice enough to give me a copy of his latest book and kind of autograph it.
Nice.
And what he wrote in the book I thought was so funny. He's like, "To Fritz, to someone who knows more about me than me." Because I'm sure he forgot a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, that's great. I have a interesting story for you about Shag, and I don't know if any of this is in his story at all, or if you know any of this.
Go ahead.
So the last job that I had, I was in IT, and I worked there for almost 17 years, so almost 2 decades of my life. One of the guys that I got very close with, he grew up with Shag, and so specifically this guy that I worked with, his brother was one of Shag's best friends.
Oh, no way.
So they've known him since he was in high school. And they were in a band together. They were in a band called the Swamp Zombies.
Is it one of the Steven brothers?
It's one of the Carey brothers.
Oh, okay, uh-huh.
And Shag used to do their artwork for their merch, for T-shirts and that kind of stuff. And this was before he had adopted that style that he's very well known for today. Yes. So this coworker of mine, when Shag really started getting some legs in his art, and this was in the early 2000s, he says to me, I have a bunch of his old artwork. And he's like, "Do you want some of it?" Because it wasn't
original artwork. It
wasn't really that special to him, And I said, "Sure." So he gave me, So I have some original Shag stuff, and it's signed Shag, but it is not in the style that he's very well known for. It's before he developed that style. So
I would.
It's very lowbrow. It's very lowbrow, and he's got monsters, because it was called Swamp Zombies, right? It was the name of the band.
Yeah.
He's got monsters, drawn, and it's not like if I showed you this work or anybody this work, no one would know that it was by Shag.
It's proto Shag, basically.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Or pre-Shag.
To me, that's even more valuable because he hasn't even fully formed yet. You're just slowly seeing the Shag style evolve. To me, like, if I knew that, I would have totally put you in the book.
What's funny is
I would have interviewed you.
I don't know if I have much to contribute other than that, but
wow, that story enough is cool to me.
I'd mentioned it to Shag once, and this was many, many years ago, over a decade ago, and he said, "Oh yeah," and he's like, "Oh, so you have some of that?" And I said, "Yeah," and he's like, "Oh, cool." Like it wasn't that big a deal to him, He's like, "Oh, that's cool," I was like, "Yeah." So
see, to me, I love. Like we all know Tim Biskup style, we all know Shag style, we all know Derek style. Yeah. But to me, like that period right before they develop their style.
Yes.
To me, that's a very important period in any artist.
It is.
And I would love to have artwork from them in that proto phase of theirs.
And you can look at that in a number of different ways, not just for artists, but say musicians, bands, where they're still trying to find their sound and they're still trying to find their style. And like this stuff, they're still trying to find their style and their look and their feel. And it's still cool art. It's just not what he's known for,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But you know what? I mean, like 50 years down the road, whatever, how many years down the road, when finally people realize the importance of this movement, and there's retrospective shows. I as a curator, I couldn't have a show without the stuff you have.
Oh,
because
okay.
I need to show to the viewer the evolution.
The evolution,
yeah.
True.
And that's why I would value that more than a regular Shag painting.
Oh, I get it, especially historically.
Yeah.
So this is volume 1.
This is volume 1.
How many volumes do you plan on releasing?
As long as people are willing to talk to me, I would like to just keep doing this in my twilight years.
Very nice.
I mean, this to me is just pure fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I spent 8 years of my life, doing this, getting paid nothing. In fact, I had to spend money to travel. But it's so fun. Yeah. It is so fun.
Yeah, I can see how it would be. It's not much different than what I do with the podcast. And I really enjoy doing the podcast. It's fun talking to people, learning their story, telling their story.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the story behind the person.
Sure.
It's not just about their art. I enjoy connecting with people, whether it's on the podcast or radio with you, or whether it's in person. We're social animals. We need that connection.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the pleasure. That's the payment in all of this.
Yeah.
Right. If I can just keep doing this until I retire, and then maybe when I retire, I can do this full time and interview more people. Like, wow. Like, that would be a blast.
That'd be fun. Yeah. Maybe we should do a project together.
We should.
So let me ask you, do you have volume 2 already lined up in your head? Do you know who's going to be in that? Or is that something you can talk about?
I do. I have 4 people lined up. I don't want to tell you right now, only just because...
I respect that.
Yeah. But I'm waiting on this big fish.
Okay.
And I hope I get this big fish. They said, like, well, let's just kind of see how volume 1 does. And then, maybe I'll be part of volume 2. And I totally get it. Get it.
Yeah.
But I really hope I catch this big fish, because it'll pretty much guarantee volume 4, 5, 6, and 7 and whatever.
So you don't have to tell me who the big fish is, but do you know if it's someone that I know? Is there anything that I can do? So can I help pull strings there?
Oh, do you know him personally, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Who? I might have to ask you after the podcast, because if you do know him, I do need strings pulled.
Okay, well, I'll help in whatever way that I can.
Okay, thanks, man.
Well, hey, before we wrap, let's tell people where they can buy the book, and let's share all your social media stuff, too. Okay.
So I am on Facebook and Instagram. My Instagram handle is lowbrow_literati. And then my Facebook, I think it's just Lowbrow Literati. Twitter, same thing, just Lowbrow Literati, one word. My website is lowbrowliterati.com. And by the way, the reason I came up with that name is it's a juxtaposition in words. It's an oxymoron.
Oh, dude, and I love it. It's extremely creative. So it's an oxymoron.
Yeah.
And it's got alliteration happening. And and it's basically got the bio written into the title, written into the name. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, how could you be lowbrow, which is a knuckle dragger,
right,
and literati, which is well read?
Right.
That doesn't make sense.
Right.
Right?
I love it.
Yeah, but I mean, in a way, that's kind of who I am, right? And that's what this movement is.
Sure.
They paint pinup girls and hot rods and tikis and mid-century modern. But if you read the book, there's a lot more to them than just that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And like I said, I'm still digging through it. So when I finish, I'm sure that I will give you a call and we will chat about it. So.
Perfect. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so my website is Lowbrow Literati. You can buy the ebook on Kindle right now on Amazon. And if you don't have a Kindle, you can still buy it on Amazon and just download the Kindle app. Okay?
Oh, there you go. There you go. And then there is a hard copy being released at the end of the year, correct?
Exactly. Oh, hopefully sooner.
Oh, okay.
So the only reason that there's a hang up is, Derek Yaniger is a busy guy.
Sure.
And I am so thankful that he said yes to the project, right? So he sent me the draft artwork for the back cover.
Okay.
Right? Because now it's a print edition. There's a front cover, a back cover, and a spine.
Right.
So he sent me the draft artwork for the back cover, and I'm like, love it. Like, let's go with it, right? So if he sends that to me sooner, then we could have it in a couple of months or so. But what I've been telling everybody is for sure December, January, that's when the print edition is coming out.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. Perfect. Yeah. Perfect. Well, hey, I appreciate you taking time out of your day to share your story with us here on the podcast. And I look forward to more stuff from you here, not only Volume 2, but is there anything still happening with the blog?
So going back to our early conversation, the pandemic, and people, we're all becoming a little crazy, but it's manifesting itself in different ways.
I think I know what you're getting at.
So pandemic hit. Now I have to work from home.
Right.
I don't get to see my coworkers, can't see my friends. And again, here we go. It's kind of creeping up on me again, right?
Right.
Like a mild depression, let's call it.
Okay.
And but this time I'm a little bit smarter, right? I don't have to take it out on my family anymore.
Sure.
And I actually, you have something to do with this. I follow you on Instagram, and you did this thing like you do a shot, and then someone else does a shot.
Uh-huh.
What is that challenge called?
Shot challenge, I guess.
I guess. So I saw you do it, and then I saw Mike from Tiki T do it, and then somebody else do it. I'm like, oh, that looks fun. Yeah.
Well, I think he tagged me. Did he tag me or did I tag him?
I think you tagged him.
Okay. Right.
So then I'm like, that looks fun.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, I texted my friends. So I created like a little video.
Okay.
And I'm like, I'll make it different. Instead of like just a shot, I'm going to teach them how to make a cocktail and then, send it to my circle of friends. And then, okay, now it's your turn. You make a cocktail and you send it to me. Right? Uh-huh. Well, guess what? None of my friends did it. but I'm like, that was kind of fun.
Right.
So I'm like, let's just keep doing this, right?
Yeah.
So then I kept on doing it. Every Friday, I would just keep sending them new cocktails,
right.
And then as the quarantine war drew longer and longer, I just got weirder and weirder, right? And then I started creating this character.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I used to be a college professor. Why don't I call myself the professor? And I'm like, I have this pipe that I don't use, and I have a jacket with elbow patches. Like, just start like acting really weird, right?
Right.
And then my friends they're having a good time. Right.
Well, I love them. Yeah.
Actually, you might know one of my friends.
Okay.
Kevin Updegrove.
Yeah, I know Kevin very well. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know he's been on my podcast. I've been on his. We've done Swapcasts.
Yes,
Yeah.
So then Kevin goes, "Hey, I'm sending you something over the mail, just to say kind of thanks for all the crazy stuff you do."
Right.
So he sent me some syrups from BG Reynolds and stuff, so I could make more different kinds of cocktails. I'm like, "Oh, cool, thanks, man."
Nice.
And then I'm like, you know what? I got a little brave, and I'm like, I'll post it on my Facebook page, and just like my friends and relatives can see it, right?
Yeah.
So I did that, and the next thing you know, I have aunts and uncles texting me going, "Dude, your uncle can't stop laughing."
Yeah.
Like, why are you talking like that? Right? And then I got braver.
Right.
I'm like, you know what? I'm going to post it on Facebook group pages. Yeah. I'll post it on Adrian's Facebook page.
I love it. I love it.
I'll post it on I Love Tiki, And then people went ape shit for it.
Yeah.
Right? And what I realized is because we're all stuck together, right? And there's no new TV shows coming out.
Right.
No one's filming.
Right.
And then this weirdo shows up on your Facebook feed, acting real strange and calling himself the professor. And, his character has keeps saying these sexual innuendos and gets in trouble with the dean,
Yeah.
People just needed a laugh.
Yeah. Well, I love them. Keep them coming.
Oh, thanks,
Keep them coming. Keep posting them on the Inside the Desert Oasis from group page. And if you guys are not sure what we're talking about, check out the group page for the podcast, Inside the Desert Oasis from on Facebook, and look for the videos by the professor. You'll see them on there. And he's the weird guy with the pipe who talks kind of funny. So.
Yes. and then so anyway, so season 1 is going to be next Friday. What is next Friday? I don't have my calendar.
Next Friday would be, let me look here. I'm going to look it up real quick.
Okay.
So next Friday will be the 14th.
Okay, August 14th, right? That's when the season finale.
Okay. Which for our listeners will be this Friday.
Yes, yeah, there you go. There you go. You have an inside scoop.
So, there you go. Well, we look forward to that.
Yeah. So the season finale is going to be this Friday. And season 2, I don't know when it's going to come out, but at least I can kind of film things ahead of time at my leisure. Yeah. Maybe get half the season in before releasing it, so I'm not up in midnight on a Thursday. Sure. And then so don't worry, there will be a season 2, and lots of more to say, lots of more jokes to come, lots of more cocktails to be had.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
Well, Fritz, it was a pleasure having you on.
Thank you for
so
having
much.
me on. I feel, like I said, I'm a fan, so being on your show is like a dream come true to me.
Oh, that's very nice of you to say. Well, I feel the same way about you. I'm a fan of your work. So thanks again for being on the podcast. And for all of our listeners out there, please visit our friend Fritz at lowbrowliterati.com and on our Facebook page. Come check out his videos of the professor and pick up the new book. Alrighty, Fritz, I'm going to let you go. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you hopefully soon.
We will talk soon.
All right.
Bye.
Cheers.
A little bit of the professor there.
Yeah, I love it. Cheers and aloha.